had heard on the ground buzz that white folks were moving to communities like Bend, Oregon, and St. George, Utah, and Forsyth County, Georgia. I wrote Searching for Whitopia, an improbable journey to the heart of white America. I decided I had to live there myself to see it firsthand, to experience it firsthand. So I embedded myself in 3 Whitopian communities. I just socialized a lot. I went to county zoning meetings. I went to meetings of the local Republican organizations. For the most part, by most residents, I was warmly received. Not in all cases, but there's an old joke. 1 black man is a delightful dinner guest. 50 black men is a ghetto. Some whites move to white-only communities because they're mostly white, and they said so to my face. I saw a lot of anger in my 27,000-mile journey. There is a religious compound called America's Promise Ministry. They are the religious arm of Aryan Nations, and I crashed their 3-day weekend retreat. They reassured me, you know, hey, Rich, we're not white supremacists, we're white separatists. And by that they meant, we don't think we're better than you, we just want to be away from you. We'd hear in the town hall meetings, we want to take our country back. And that left me to scratch my head and wonder, take it back from what?
I'm a first-generation Mexican-American. I grew up in poverty. I'm the youngest girl of 13 siblings. The only thing in my community was really dysfunctional role models, gang members. The level of my involvement in the gangs started escalating. So it finally got to the point where I had been arrested enough times that I was sent to a long-term juvenile detention facility. I did finally have someone who took the time to treat me as a person, and that was my parole officer. For young Latinos growing up in a low-income community, the expectations really are that you're going to probably not finish high school, that you almost certainly won't go to college. Currently, I'm finishing up my last year of law school. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Southern California. I am actually also running for office. I'm running for a state assembly seat here in Nevada. I have a friend, her parents just bought a home in a very affluent neighborhood. We were going to go jogging, and I pulled over to finish up a cell phone conversation before I went into her house, and a car drove by several times. It had an older white woman driving. She pulled over, asked me why I was there. She said that I could potentially be casing the homes, and it makes me wonder, as a person of color, whether or not she asks every single person whether or not they belong in that neighborhood.
I grew up near a town called Boonville, Arkansas. My father was not a very nice man. He was very much involved in biased type of activities. I've always been ashamed of my father. Prejudice is this big elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. It seems like people just step around it like they're walking on ice, and it's ridiculous. Just take a big dive, get in, get wet, and start getting the work done. My husband and I purposely sought out to move and live in a mostly African-American neighborhood. That very step alone can begin to make a difference. People need to be talking about this. This needs to be in school curriculums. We need to teach the children that we are a nation of many different people and accept that. We infect our children with this unbridled fear that leads to hate, and it's just, we gotta stop.
Well, that was quite a medley of America there, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Tom, what did you make of that?
First of all, God bless that lady and her husband. She gets it. She wants to talk about it. She wants to talk about prejudice. She wants to talk about racism. Now, back to my point earlier. White people are so embarrassed about our history of slavery that they don't want to talk about racism. That man went to a Klan rally, and they don't want to be called racist. They want to be called separatist.
You know,
when does a racist be embarrassed about being called a racist?
Chris, Tom, I think it's a very, very important point that needs to be made right here and right now. As adults, we can sit here and have this conversation. But when we're talking to our youth of America, I think we need to be incredibly careful about how we address this, because when we look at the plight of the existing within the African American community, and we're constantly harping on the trials and tribulations of race. It's one thing to talk about it in your home, but it's another thing entirely to revisit it time and time and time again in the public eye. What you're doing is giving an ingrained excuse for our youth to fall back on, as opposed to being pushed forward, to move forward, and to strive to be all that they can be. I know that for a fact because that's something that I grew up with. A lot of times my mother and father were like, listen, we understand it exists, but guess what? You can't legislate somebody's heart. Handle your business.
John,
you make it seem like your drunk uncle that you're embarrassed to.
No, not at all.
You know, you'll only talk about it in the home?
No, I'm not saying only. I'm saying to harp on it continuously. We got to be careful about that, because again, you're talking about people who are looking for excuses not to move full steam ahead when they're constantly presented with those things.
There's an in-between point. And Tom, all due respect, and I'm sorry about how this is going to come out, but the idea that in this country we do not discuss race all the time, I'm sorry, it's an absurdity. We discuss it all the time. What in the world are we doing right here? Every racial incident that comes up, we just did Tiger Woods, we just got finished with Negro, we talk about it all the time. And I also want to add that in search of Whitopia, and the fact that that's a funny word, what's that for? What is the purpose of something like that? Okay, we've learned, yeah, there are enclaves, and it's more than a few, where people have backwards feelings. How do we teach a person to get and to keep a job? There's so much we have to teach people. There are larger priorities we have than searching for Whitopia.
But John, you're an academic, so you know that what the purpose of the searching for Whitopia is.
And there's a reason I left academia.
It's an inversion of power. It's because, in fact, we know that white sociologists and anthropologists went into African American communities and wrote tons of books in precisely those kinds of ways. It's what makes it funny is that it's a sort of inversion of power. And so, although I agree with you that we often talk about these racial moments, I think what we keep forgetting to do is talk in the long version about the long civil rights movement that goes all the way back to the question of emancipation and freedom through the mid-century civil rights movement that we recognize today on
I think what we fail to talk about is now.
And that moves forward into talking about issues like marriage equality, gender equality, and all of the ways in which the long civil rights movement continues.